Hello everyone. In my last video about the Alek Minassian trial, I mentioned an expert witness that was being called by the defense named Dr. Alexander Westphal, a professor of psychiatry at the Yale School of Medicine. Dr. Westphal is involved in researching the link between autism and criminal behavior and was hired by Minassian's defense team to assess him. He prepared and submitted a report to the court about Minassian's mental state, in which he describes Minassian as having an autistic way of thinking similar to psychosis, and argues that Minassian should be found not criminally responsible for committing the van attack because his autism prevented him from understanding the difference between right and wrong. The court was also made aware that Westphal conducted a video assessment of Alek Minassian in December of 2019, in which Minassian discussed the Toronto van attack and his motivations for committing it in great detail. Westphal is a critical witness for the defense, as he is their only expert witness who is arguing that Minassian should be found not criminally responsible, or NCR. The Crown has requested that Westphal's video be disclosed to them so that they can use it to challenge his conclusions in court. The judge presiding over the case, Justice Anne Molloy, ordered that they be disclosed. However, Westphal then sent a letter to the court stating that he would not testify if the video was played in court, where it could be watched and possibly recorded by the public. Court reporter Alek Minassian wrote an article about this, which I quote. Westphal wrote a letter to the court refusing to testify if the video would be played in the Zoom court, which is being watched by pre-approved media and lawyers, and if there was any chance the videos would be made public. In the letter, Westphal denied relying on the footage to prepare his report and did not realize they could become part of the trial. For me, this is a line that cannot be crossed. I will not testify if there is any possibility that the tapes will be surreptitiously recorded via Zoom or released for publication or distribution, he wrote. He gave 3 reasons. First, that Minassian was inspired to violence from people he watched online. I think Mr. Minassian's footage could have the same effect on other vulnerable people and could serve as a catalyst for future violence, Westphal said. Westphal also said allowing the videos to be released publicly would also validate Minassian's stated desire for notoriety. Finally, he said, he is concerned about the stigmatizing effect the negative stereotypes in the video could have on millions of people with autism and their families. Mr. Minassian shares a developmental disability with millions of Canadians and Americans who pose absolutely no threat to anyone around them. Furthermore, they are a very vulnerable population, already likely to be bullied and much more likely to be the victims of violence than regular people, he said. While I understand that it is essential for the court to understand autism and the role it played in Mr. Minassian's actions, my duty to the many people I know with autism surpasses that. So, before I talk about whether Westphal's actions are ethical or not, I'd like to talk about how what Westphal is trying to do is actually illegal. In Canada, there is a criminal offence known as failure to comply with appearance notice or summons. What this means is that under Canadian law, Dr. Westphal will be committing a crime if he doesn't show up to testify at Minassian's trial if he is ordered by the court to do so. Now, suppose Dr. Westphal were to show up at court but refuse to testify. This falls under another criminal offence known as contempt of court. Witnesses who are called to testify in court are legally obligated to do so. There's no way around that unless you have a valid legal excuse, like being in a car accident and not being able to come to court because you're in the hospital. So, Dr. Westphal is threatening to commit a crime if he doesn't get what he wants. The fact that he's doing this could very well be a crime itself. There's another criminal offence in Canada known as obstructing justice. The second subsection of this offence gives a general provision for people who are attempting to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice. Subsection 3 gives more specific examples. I'm not a lawyer and I haven't seen the letter Dr. Westphal sent to the court. I'm relying on second-hand reports from court reporters about what's in parts of it, so I'm in no position to say whether Westphal has committed a crime here, but he might have. Now, if a Canadian were to do what Dr. Westphal is doing, he would be arrested by the police, taken to jail, and then brought to court to testify. He might also be charged with 1 or more criminal offences. However, the fact that Dr. Westphal is from the United States means that the Canadian authorities can't arrest him. Instead, he would have to be extradited from the US, which is a lengthy bureaucratic process that involves the intervention of the Canadian government and can take years, after which the Alek Minassian trial would be over. When discussing this issue in court, Justice Molloy said, "If he was here, there would be no problem. I would not for a moment tolerate it. That doctor would be under arrest before he could blink." However, he wasn't here. Justice Molloy's response was to give in to Westphal's demands and seal the video, preventing it from being played in court. I quote from Ms. Hasham's article. With what she called a gun to her head, Superior Court Justice Anne Molloy made the unprecedented and extraordinary decision on Friday to proactively seal video recordings of Alek Minassian being interviewed by an American forensic psychiatrist who refused to testify if the recordings would be released to the public. Sealing exhibits that don't even exist yet, that I have not even seen in advance in order to secure his testimony is offensive, said Molloy. That said, I am going to do it. Though it was tantamount to paying a ransom to a kidnapper, Molloy said that the alternative would mean denying Minassian a fair trial for the first-degree murder of 10 people and the attempted murder of 16. Something like this has never been done before in Canada. It's a controversial move, and the sealing decision is being opposed by multiple news organizations. I'll be covering Westphal's testimony and evidence in a future video after he is called to testify next week. For now, I'm going to offer my own brief analysis of whether Westphal's decision is ethical or not, and why I think he's making it. Westphal's stated concerns are that he doesn't want the video to inspire future violence, he doesn't want Minassian to get more notoriety, and he doesn't want people with autism to be stigmatized further. Now, let's think about the problems with Westphal's decision. Dr. Westphal is the only defense expert saying that Minassian should be NCR. Without him, the defense has no case, which is one of the reasons why Justice Molloy gave in to his demands. The fact that the defense had to find someone from a university in the US suggests that they might have been a bit hard up for mental health experts who would be willing to say that Minassian is NCR. If it weren't for Westphal saying that Minassian is NCR, this trial probably wouldn't be happening. Minassian would be found guilty, and the only question to be decided would be how much jail time he'd get. The trial wouldn't be anywhere near as prolonged, and it wouldn't be anywhere near as contentious, which would result in much less publicity for Alek Minassian, and therefore a reduced likelihood for inspiring future violence from other publicity-seeking murderers. The only reason this video is now an issue is because Westphal is saying Alek Minassian is NCR in the first place. Westphal's NCR defense of Minassian has already stigmatized people with autism, as it has led the public to believe that autistic people have no moral compass, and that they can have a way of thinking similar to psychosis that prevents them from knowing that killing a bunch of innocent people they've never met in the name of a misogynistic hate group is wrong. Consequently, Westphal has been condemned by autism awareness groups throughout Canada. Justice Molloy even felt compelled to make a statement about this in court. It is as follows. People diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder are not on trial here. Alek Minassian is on trial here. He happens to be a person with that diagnosis. It may or may not amount to a defense in this trial. That is yet to be determined. The question will not be if Mr. Minassian has ASD, but whether as a result of that disability he was unable to appreciate the moral wrongfulness of his acts at the time of these events. The use of this particular disability as a grounding for a Section 16 defense in this particular case does not mean that individuals on the spectrum are prone to violence or that they do not know right from wrong. I am confident that there will be no such evidence in this trial. Further, the fact of Mr. Minassian's diagnosis is merely the first step in establishing the Section 16 defense. There is a long distance between that and not criminally responsible for killing people. Most importantly, this will be an individualistic analysis based solely on Mr. Minassian's disability and its particular effect on him, nobody else. As one autism organization has stated, if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism. Exactly my point. Now, what if Westphal succeeds in his defense and Alek Minassian is found NCR? That will open up a very dangerous can of worms for future mass murderers to exploit. After committing their attacks, they could all go to court and say, hey, it's not my fault, I have autism. I didn't know that it was wrong to murder all of those people because I wanted to get revenge on society for not being able to get laid. Please send me to a mental hospital instead of a prison, where I'll have a much nicer time and I can maybe get released one day and totally not do the same thing again. This will also be an issue for Alek Minassian if he gets found NCR, of course. It's not hard to see how this could lead to more violence, more publicity for mass murderers, and a greater stigma against people with autism. So although Westphal's stated goal is to avoid inspiring future violence, giving Minassian more publicity, or stigmatizing people with autism, I would argue that he has already done and is still trying to do all three of these things. Given that he's a Yale professor who researches the intersectionality of autism and the justice system, he has to have realized that what he's doing would carry this kind of risk. What makes him think that trying to get Minassian found NCR would be worth it? Well, at this point, I have absolutely no idea. I've taken a cursory look at some of Westphal's research publications, and he acknowledges that autism in general does not make people more likely to commit acts of violence than the general population. However, he cites other research papers indicating that a large proportion of mass shooters, around 28%, are believed to have autism. He also cites other research indicating that people with autism are overrepresented in forensic mental hospitals. This is a very poorly understood and understudied issue with inconsistent findings, and Westphal acknowledges this. Westphal believes that there is a small group of people with autism who are much more likely to commit crimes and have a unique set of challenges and risk factors that require specialized tools to assess and treat. However, the limited research that is available about this group suggests that they often have mental disorders other than autism, such as psychotic disorders, ADHD, and conduct disorder, disorders for which there is a large body of evidence suggesting they have a correlation with the risk of violent behavior. Dr. Westphal has not done any studies on this particular group of people with autism or on mass murderers. His papers are largely focused on calling on the mental health community for more attention and resources to study people with autism who get in trouble with the law. There's nothing in his body of work that addresses the issue of whether mass murderers who are believed to have autism should be found NCR, whether there is such a thing as an autistic way of thinking similar to psychosis, or how people like Alek Minassian should be assessed or treated. Dr. Westphal is not an expert on incels, violent extremism, or mass murderers. In my last video, I showed you all a research paper Westphal had written in which he talks about several cases in which an NCR defense on the basis of having autism might have been appropriate. However, they all concerned cases where the person with autism didn't know that what he was doing was wrong and didn't understand why he was in trouble. None of the profiles in these case studies apply to Alek Minassian. Westphal talks about another NCR case in an interview he did with the Hartford Courant in 2017. The case concerned Alek Chatton, an autistic man from Connecticut who stabbed his mother with a knife and was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Westphal told the Courant this: "The high marks of high-functioning autism, social disability, rigidity of thought, an inability to pick up on social cues, subtexts and norms, and repetitive patterns of behavior do line up with the two prongs of Connecticut's insanity statute, an inability to discern right from wrong at the time of the offense, and an inability to conform or control one's conduct to the requirements of the law." Westphal said autism doesn't preclude an insanity defense. "It can be very appropriate to use an insanity defense in cases which involve autism," Westphal said. We can see that the argument being applied here is similar to what Dr. Westphal is saying about Alek Minassian. However, in addition to having autism, Alek Chatton had ADHD, sensory integration disorder, depression, and anxiety. He also experienced psychotic symptoms, such as hearing voices, and was on medication for them that he had stopped taking when he committed his offense. There also appeared to be little premeditation. This wasn't something he spent months thinking about beforehand. I don't have the court transcripts on hand, but it seems that there was a lot more at play here than just autism. This case doesn't line up with the Alek Minassian case either. So, given the fact that Dr. Westphal's research history and news interviews don't give a clear reason for why he's doing what he's doing, or why he thinks Alek Minassian should be NCR, I will be very interested in hearing what he has to say when he testifies, and will be obtaining a copy of his assessment when it's released. One impression I've gotten from reading Westphal's research is that he seems to have a bit of a soft spot for people with autism who've been mistreated or misunderstood by the justice system. This could be one of the reasons why he's fighting so hard in this case. He believes that this could be a landmark case that will lead to people with autism being treated better by the justice system and perhaps by society at large. Now, one of my more cynical theories about Westphal's actions is that he has reasons for trying to stop the video from being played other than the ones he's said. Maybe there's something in the video that will make him look bad or unprofessional. Westphal has already received a lot of negative press from the media and autism advocacy groups, surely something that someone in his line of work doesn't want. So this might just be an attempt on his part to run damage control. As for whether Westphal's decision to strong-arm the court will indeed accomplish the things he wants it to, well, that isn't clear. We don't know if anyone watching the Zoom trial would have surreptitiously recorded the video or not. If they did, we don't know who would have gotten it or how much it would have done to inspire future violence or further stigmatize people with autism. I would argue that in trying to prevent a hypothetical catastrophe, Dr. Westphal is creating a real one. As for the essence of his argument, should Alek Minassian be found NCR or not, I'll be examining that in my next video, and will be continuing to cover the trial as it unfolds. Before I end this video, I'll say this. I myself have autism. Dr. Westphal claims to be making his decision on the basis of having a duty to the many people he knows with autism, wanting to prevent us from experiencing negative stereotypes, and believing we are a vulnerable population. I think it's important to point out that people with autism didn't elect Dr. Westphal as their leader. He has no right to speak on my behalf or on behalf of anyone else with autism. He has no right to go out and commit a crime, or threaten to commit a crime, or show contempt for the Canadian justice system in my name. I don't want or need Dr. Westphal as my champion, and I imagine that there are many other people with autism who feel the same way. While we may not be able to be certain of whether Alek Minassian is criminally responsible or not, Dr. Westphal is completely responsible for what he's done, criminally or otherwise. What he has shown us is that in trying to stop a mass murderer from being found guilty of a crime, he is willing to become guilty of a crime himself. What kind of an example is that? And what does that say about whether Dr. Westphal's research methods or professional judgment should be trusted? I'll leave you with those questions. In my next video, I'll be looking at Alek Minassian's police interrogation video and offering my insights into how autism has influenced him and whether he appears to understand the difference between right and wrong. As I've stated before, I'm not an expert, but the fact that I have autism myself should help me make a useful contribution to this discussion. You can follow me on Twitter for more updates about this case. I've put links in the description for Twitter feeds of several court reporters who are involved in reporting this case, so you can follow them for live tweeted updates about court proceedings.